Okay, everyone, welcome to exercise 4. And if we head on over to the website and we look under exercise 4, we can see here that exercise 4 is about architectural presentations using Illustrator, right? So we're going to look on how do we do architectural presentations using Illustrator, right? And if you look at the examples on the handout, you can see where this is a standard architectural drawing and it perhaps has a black background because perhaps most times we do architectural drawings, they are in AutoCAD and the background is usually black. So that's what this is representing here. And we want to look how to convert this into this. So if you look at your exercise files that we have available, you will see a bunch of images, mostly PDFs, of all kinds of architectural assets. Now what you'll be looking for, you're going to be needing a DWG file, right? And if I open this DWG file here, you will see that this is what the file looks like in AutoCAD. And I can, in the AutoCAD application, you might realize that there are tools that are similar to Illustrator. However, they're more geared towards architects and engineers. But notice that, like Illustrator, I can clearly see these lines here. I can select a line, I can move it around, you know, but notice how there is no precision because there is no measurements and dimensions, and these are things that we're all familiar with architectural drawings. So the idea is we want to not show the drawing as construction drawings, but rather to use this same method used to create construction drawings as working drawings. So what you'll notice is when you save an AutoCAD file, it saves as a DWG file. And that DWG file is able to be read in Illustrator. Alright, so therefore we're going to open Illustrator now. And we're going to go to Open. And we're going to browse for the location of this DWG file that we see here. Here we go. And I'm going to open this like that. Now your Illustrator should bring up this option here to read the DWG file. And you're going to leave it on the default, which should be scale to fit artboard. We're going to choose OK. Ignore any messages and just choose OK to open. Now once the file is open, this is what you should have. Now notice when you hover over these lines, the same lines that you noticed coming from AutoCAD is now in Illustrator. Now you might notice that these lines are a bit thick though, and that's just because the way how Illustrator has interpreted the line weight, right? Okay, now also notice the elevations and notice how all of these are individual lines, right? And this is because Illustrator is able to read the vector information from that DWG file. Okay, so now what we're going to do before we do anything else is we need to fix these line weights. Now if you remember from the previous class, we do have the stroke panel which allows us to manipulate individual lines. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to change all these lines to black. So we're going to select we're going to select everything. And notice when we select all the lines in our drawing, if we take a look at what this is saying here, it is not able to tell us what stroke and what fill we have selected, right? Notice that there. However, if I selected, let's zoom in here, if I selected one line, like maybe this cyan line here, it's able to tell me that I have a cyan line selected. However, if I select multiple lines, it's going to give me a question mark, and that is because it has multiple lines selected and it's not able to display multiple lines here. Now, the first thing we're going to do before we change all these lines to one color is we need to get ourselves organized. Now, if you look on your layers tab, notice that you have some pre-made layers. And funny thing, these layers were actually interpreted from the AutoCAD application. If I go over to AutoCAD application and I look on my layers, notice that these layers here, the short for annotate, appliances, details, dimensions, and now these layers are actually now interpreted with Illustrator. So that this tells us that Illustrator is able to read DWG files and to translate the information from it into Illustrator. Now, the first thing we want to do is get a little bit more organized with our text. And notice that the text has also been interpreted. We can use the text tool and be able to highlight this text, and we can modify it. However, what we want to do is to put all text objects on one layer. Notice we don't have a layer for text objects here. Now, in order to do that, we could manually select each object here and then create a new layer to put them on. And to do that, well, let's do one first. So I'm going to select this balcony thing here, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this new layer text. Now, of course, if I wanted to put this on this layer, I could search for it here in this list and drag it to that new layer, but that might be a little bit ergonomically difficult. So what I suggest you do is to click on the word on the layer, right click on the object that you want to go to that layer, and then you're going to go to arrange and send to current layer. And the current layer you have selected is text. So when you do that, it will go over to that layer. And surely enough, if I turn it on and off, you will see that is now there. Now we have many other text to select here, but rather than individually selecting them, we also have text over here. Rather than individually selecting them, what I want you to do is to go to select object and then say all text objects. So that's under select object, and then you go to all text objects, and once you do that, it's going to automatically select all text objects in the drawing. When it does that, we can now put everything over to the text layer here. Now, funny thing, an important thing to notice, when I right click and I say okay, now I want to go to arrange and send to current layer, you might notice send to current layer is currently grayed out, and you might be wondering why is that. Now the reason for that is that there is one text object that is already on the text layer. So, you know, Illustrator is saying that, well, you can't send something on a layer to itself. So what you want to do is to deselect this singular text that we already had placed on the text layer. So again, when you select all the text, you want to deselect the one that we already placed on the text layer, and you do that by holding Shift and clicking on the text there. All the other text is still selected, and now when you highlight the text layer and then you right click on any one of the text, you should see now send to current layer. Now once you do that, now you'll be confident that all the text in the drawing is now on one layer. We can actually turn that off or on. So that is great. So now that we have the text organized, next we want to get organized with our line weights, right? We definitely want the lines to be in the same color, and we want all the line weights to be a reasonable width. Most of these widths are quite thick and some are thin. So what we're going to do first is we're going to select everything here, and we're going to go to stroke. So ensure that you have highlighted the stroke here. And this is a key point that I want us to know. When you notice that the stroke has the question mark now, that is telling us that we have a multitude of strokes that's currently selected. Now when you do this, you want to ensure that your text layer is off, because we don't want to be adding a stroke to our text layer. All right, so make sure that that layer is off. So when you select everything on all the layers, when you select all the objects on your artboard, you're gonna now go to color, and then what you're gonna do is recolor all the strokes with black, and you can see that the black button that's right here. Now you need to ensure that you have the stroke that's currently activated on top, right? Because you're applying black to all strokes. Now once you do that, there you go, and you deselect, now everything will currently be black, right? So if I look around here, you will see that all these drawings are black. Now of course we have an issue. The line weight is still a major issue. So what we want to do is make all the line weight one singular line weight, and we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to select all the line work here, and this time we're going to head over to our stroke panel, and in our stroke panel we can adjust the line weight right there. So we want to put our line weight to perhaps, let's try 0.25, right, and that is looking a little bit more reasonable perhaps. As a matter of fact, that may be a bit too thick, so let's select everything and let's go to 0.2. All right, let's try 0.5. There we go. Yeah, definitely too thick, so we want to use a stroke of 0.15. Now this is a bit more workable. You can see that we can see all the window frames here. We can pick up all of these details here, and we do have some unwanted lines like this line here that has now reared its ugly head. Now before we go into cleaning up those lines, we need to now turn on our text layer. So we're going to make sure that our text layer is on, and you can see that our text layer still has the color, that is the blue applied to it. So let us also change that to black. So to do that, we're going to select the little round symbol here, and that will select all text. Now for text, we don't want to change the stroke. Instead, we want to change the fill color of the text, right? So you're going to ensure that you need to ensure that your stroke, your fill is highlighted here. And notice you also get a question mark here because it's selecting multiple different fills. So we're going to change all of those fills to one color again. So we're going to select the black color here, or here, anyone. All right, great. So now if we should look around on our text layer, we'll see that it is now black. All right, so we are getting somewhere. So what we want to do now is kind of position this in place. So we want to have two artboards. One artboard will be for the elevation and another artboard will be for the plan. So to do that, we're going to go to the artboard tool that's located right here. And once we go into artboard mode, notice that the artboard now becomes highlighted. We can see the name of the artboard for those who have, I think it's 2018 and up. And we can also see the name of the artboard up here. We can also see the size of the artboard, right? And if you remember how Illustrator works, whatever we have selected, we're getting the properties for it on our bar up top. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to create another artboard. So we want to click the plus button that's right here, and you will see another artboard will be created. Now when that artboard is created, what we want to do is select our plan and we want to move this over. Now when you're moving Illustrator content, you want to grab the actual line. If you try to grab in the middle, you're not going to be pulling anything. You have to hold on to an actual line content because this drawing has no fill. So we're going to grab that and we're going to put it roughly in the center of the page. And we're going to do the same thing for the elevation. We're going to put it roughly in the center of the page here. Then we're going to use our artboard tool again. And what we want to do is we want to name our artboard. So we want to name this artboard elevation. And we want to name this artboard or floor plan. Great. So now we are a bit more organized in how we're going to do our coloring. Now the first thing we want to do is try to get our elevations to look a bit more vibrant. So what we're going to do now is to start to clean up the elevations, right? So we're gonna, so for example, this line that's here, we're gonna remove that line there. And of course we can use our direct selection tool, which allows us to select individual lines. There we go. So we're going to remove that, and we basically want to clean up the drawing, so we want to remove that line there, this one, and these are just hidden lines that came over as a result of importing a DWG file. All right, great. All right, so once our line work is all cleaned up, at this point it would be a good idea to save your work. So I'm going to save my work as exercise 4. And I'm going to make sure I'm saving it as an Illustrator file. And Illustrator will usually give this option. And when it gives this option, what it is saying is, well, you just choose your version of Illustrator. And this option here, create a PDF compatible file. This is basically enabling the option for the Illustrator file to be opened directly in a PDF application. So we're going to make sure those two options are on, and we're going to choose OK. All right, now Illustrator 2020 has a file recovery option. I believe it saves every 5 to 10 minutes. So if you lose your work, you should be able to get it back. However, we don't want to depend on that. So we want to save as often as we can, right? All right, so now that we have this selected here, now that we have our plans a bit more organized, let us manipulate some of our line work. So we know that we want perhaps this line being the ground line to be a bit brighter, right? So we have more than one options. What we could do is select all the lines along this edge here and make it thicker. But to make life a bit easier, it would be much easier to trace on top of this line with a much thicker line representing our floor plan. Now, when you're tracing lines on top of lines in Illustrator, things get a little tricky. And I'll show you why if I select the pen tool here. And let's say I wanted to draw a line over this line here. Once I hover over this point here with the pen tool, it is going to want to add the line here and merge it with this line, and that's not what you might want to happen. So in order to be able to trace and to enhance some of our line work, we need to get a little bit organized with our layers so that we can control how we do that. So first thing we want to do is let us select our elevation. Well, let's turn off the text layer. There we go. We're going to select all of our elevation and we're going to put that on a new layer and we're going to call that elevation. So we're going to create a new layer, and our new layer is located here. New layer button. And when it created the new layer, we want to call this elevation drawing. Great. So now we need to highlight the layer, right click and say move to new layer. So now we can turn the elevation on or off, depending. I think I might have made an error there. Hold on. There we go. There we go. Right. So now we can turn the layer on or off as we please. Now, one of the reasons for doing this is we actually want to lock this layer. So I'm going to lock the elevation drawing layer. And I'm going to use my pen tool now. Let's create a new layer and I'll call it updated line work. There we go. Call it updated line work. Now this layer we want to be on top of the elevation drawing layer. And what we're going to do on this updated line work layer is to kind of fix up some of our line work so that our drawing reads a bit more nicer. So I'm going to get my pen tool and I'm going to make sure that the elevation layer is locked. All right, that's important because when we draw on our updated line layer, we don't want it to be merging or messing with that elevation drawing layer. So I'm just going to trace this over here. And what I'm doing is just tracing over the lines. Now Illustrator has the ability to snap to anchors. But I mean, we're going to make this line really thick. So if it doesn't 100% snap, it should be fine. There we go. Press escape. I'm going to use my selection tool so I can see that that is the line that I have drawn. And then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to make this line thicker. So I'm going to go to my stroke tool and I'm going to perhaps make this line about 0.5, probably 0.8. actually, let me fix up my stroke and fill here. So I want to ensure that I'm on my stroke. All right, you need to make sure that. So your stroke is highlighted. And I want to make the stroke 0.8. Maybe let's try making it 1. 1 is actually, yeah, there we go. So we have a nice, strong baseline there, as you can see. All right. I might have left off a section here, so I'm going to just use my pen tool and continue this line out there like that. There we go.